My name is Emily and I'm 28. I'm standing in a church drowning in my sister Hannah's wedding dress, about to marry her blind fiancé Charles, a millionaire I've never met. My family says it's for her future, but my heart screams, this is wrong. The veil chokes me. Her perfume lingers like a ghost. Why am I here, not her? What are they hiding? I'm scared, but I can't run. Have you ever faced a choice that broke you? Like and subscribe to hear my story unfold. I sat at the kitchen table, the smell of burnt coffee filling the air. My mother Patricia stood by the sink, her back rigid hands gripping the counter. 2 weeks before I'd stood in that church, she'd called me home. Her voice clipped over the phone. Now she turned eyes cold and said, "Emily, you're marrying Charles. Hannah's gone. She left after a fight with him. We need you to take her place." My stomach dropped. I was 28, a librarian who loved quiet days shelving books, not someone who'd step into her sister's life. Hannah. My older sister was the glamorous one, always chasing the spotlight. We hadn't been close in years, not since she moved to the city and started posting her perfect life online. But this marrying her blind millionaire fiancé, it felt like a sick joke. "Mom, what are you talking about?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Where's Hannah? Why me?" Patricia's lips tightened. "She's not coming back, Emily. Charles's wealth is our only shot to clear your father's debts. You're doing this for the family. Debts. My father Gerald had tanked his construction business years ago, leaving us scraping by. I'd worked extra shifts at the library to help, but this was different. This was my life." I pushed back my chair, the scrape loud in the silence. "I'm not a bargaining chip. Call Hannah. Find her." Patricia's eyes narrowed. "You've always been the responsible one. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Her words cut deep, like I was just a tool to fix their mess. I thought of the last time I saw Hannah at Christmas. Her laugh brittle as she dodged questions about Charles. Had she run because of him or because of Mom? My younger brother Ethan hovered in the doorway, his hoodie sleeves tugged over his knuckles. He was 19, lanky with the same dark hair as me, but eyes that carried too much worry for his age. You don't have to do this," he said, voice low. Patricia shot him a look and he flinched but didn't back down. I saw Hannah leave. She had a suitcase. She was crying. My heart twisted. Crying Hannah, who always seemed untouchable, was running scared. "Ethan, stay out of this," Patricia snapped, but I caught his gaze. He knew something. I stood ignoring Mom's glare and followed him to the living room. The house felt smaller, the walls crowded with old photos and wedding plans strewn across the coffee table. Ethan pulled me to the couch, glancing back to make sure Mom wasn't listening. "She sent me letters," he whispered, pulling a crumpled envelope from his pocket. Hannah said she was scared of Charles. Something about his business. She didn't tell me everything, but she sounded broken. I took the letter, my fingers trembling. Hannah's handwriting was messy, not her usual neat script. "Ethan, don't tell Mom," it read. "I can't marry him. He's not what he seems." My throat tightened. What did that mean? Was Charles dangerous? Or was Hannah just overwhelmed? I wanted to call her, but Ethan said her phone was off. I felt a pang of guilt for how distant we'd grown. When we were kids, we'd share secrets under the blankets, promising to always have each other's backs. Now I was supposed to wear her wedding dress. You can't do this," Ethan said, his voice urgent. "Mom's lying about something. I heard her on the phone talking about a contract." A contract. My mind raced. Was this really about Dad's debts? Or was there more? I wanted to storm back to Mom, demand answers, but my legs felt heavy. The weight of her expectations of Hannah's absence pressed down on me. I was the good daughter, the one who never said no. But this wasn't picking up extra chores or covering a bill. This was my future. I slipped the letter into my pocket, my resolve hardening. "I'll figure this out," I told Ethan, though I had no idea how. Back in the kitchen, Patricia was stacking dishes, her movements sharp. I took a breath, steadying myself. "Mom, I need to know why Hannah left. If I'm doing this, I deserve the truth." She didn't look at me, just kept scrubbing a plate. "You don't need to know. You need to do what's right." Her dismissal stung like I was invisible. I turned away, my chest tight, and headed to my old bedroom upstairs. The room was a time capsule, faded posters, a quilt Grandma made, and a photo of me and Hannah on the dresser grinning at a county fair. We were 10 and 12, sticky with cotton candy before life pulled us apart. I picked it up, my eyes burning. Replacing her felt like erasing the sister I used to love. But if she was scared, if Charles was hiding something, I couldn't just follow Mom's orders. I sat on the bed, the letter in my hands, and read it again. Hannah's words were a puzzle, and I was missing pieces. What had she found out? And why was Mom so desperate to push me into this marriage? I clutched Hannah's letter, the paper crinkling under my fingers, and slipped it under my pillow. The bedroom's silence felt suffocating, broken only by the faint hum of traffic outside. I needed answers, but Patricia's dismissal echoed in my head. She'd always been sharp, but this was different, calculated, like she was hiding a bigger plan. I stood pacing the creaky floorboards and decided to search her office downstairs. If Ethan was right about a contract, maybe I'd find proof. The hallway was dark, the house settling into its nighttime groans. I tiptoed past Ethan's room, where his light was still on, probably texting friends to escape our mess. Downstairs, Patricia's office door was ajar, a sliver of moonlight spilling onto the carpet. I slipped inside, heart racing. The room smelled of her lavender lotion, a scent that used to comfort me, but now felt like a warning. Her desk was cluttered with bills, wedding RSVPs, and a half-empty wine glass. I rummaged through drawers, careful not to make noise, until my fingers brushed a folder tucked beneath a stack of receipts. I pulled it out, my pulse hammering. The folder was labeled Charles Agreement. Inside were pages of legal jargon, but one line stood out: marriage ensures debt forgiveness for Gerald's liabilities. My father's name in bold print felt like a punch. So this was it, my life traded to erase his mistakes. But there was more, a clause about Charles's trust fund, only accessible post-wedding. The numbers were staggering, millions tied to this union. My knees buckled and I sank into the chair. They weren't just saving the family, they were cashing in. A floorboard creaked outside and I froze, shoving the folder back. Patricia's voice called softly, "Emily, you up?" I held my breath, praying she wouldn't come in. Her footsteps faded toward the kitchen and I exhaled, but the folder's contents burned in my mind. How could she do this? I was her daughter, not a contract clause. I thought of calling Ethan, but he was already scared. I needed someone outside this house, someone who'd listen. The next morning, I dragged myself to the library, my eyes heavy from sleeplessness. The familiar smell of old books usually calmed me, but today it felt like a cage. Clara, my coworker, was shelving returns, her curly hair bouncing as she hummed. She'd been my friend since I started here 3 years ago, always quick with a laugh or a coffee run. "You look like hell, Em," she said, setting down a stack of novels. "What's going on?" I hesitated, then spilled it all: the marriage, Hannah's disappearance, the contract. Her eyes widened and she pulled me into the break room, away from prying ears. "That's insane," she whispered. "Your mom's pimping you out for money." Her bluntness made me wince, but it was true. Clara leaned closer, her voice soft. "When I was 22, my dad tried to push me into a job I hated to save our farm. I said no, and he didn't speak to me for a year. But I'm free now. You can say no, Em." Her words sparked something in me, a flicker of defiance, but fear smothered it. "It's not that simple," I said. "If I don't do this, we lose everything. The house, Ethan's college fund." Clara shook her head. "You're not responsible for their choices." Hannah ran. Maybe she had the right idea. I stared at my coffee mug, the steam curling like my tangled thoughts. Could I run? The idea felt reckless, but it lingered. Back home, Ethan was in the garage, tinkering with his old bike. He looked up, his face pale. "Mom's been on the phone all morning talking about you and Charles." She sounded desperate. I swallowed hard. "Did you hear anything else?" He nodded, glancing around. "She mentioned a lawyer, said something about making sure Emily doesn't back out." "What's that mean?" My stomach churned. "A lawyer?" Were they locking me into this legally? I pulled him inside, away from the open garage door. Ethan, I found a contract in Mom's office. It's not just about Dad's debts. There's a trust fund, millions tied to the marriage. His eyes widened and he cursed under his breath. So that's why she's pushing you. It's not about Hannah. It's about money. Hearing him say it made it real, and the betrayal cut deeper. I'd always been the one to fix things, to smooth over Mom's tempers or Dad's absences. But this was too much. I went back to my room, the folder's words replaying in my head. I wanted to confront Patricia, to scream until she saw me as more than a solution. But what if she shut me out? What if I lost Ethan in this fight? I sat on the floor back against the bed and pulled out the childhood photo of me and Hannah from the dresser. Her smile in the picture was so bright, so different from the fear in her letter. I needed to find her to know why she ran. But first, I had to face Mom to demand the truth she was burying. My hands shook as I stood, resolve building. This wasn't over, but it was starting to feel like a battle I couldn't win. I stepped out of the car, the gravel crunching under my sneakers, and stared up at Charles's mansion. It loomed over the Ohio countryside, all glass and stone, like something from a magazine I'd never afford. 1 week after finding that contract in Mom's office, I was here for a meet and greet. My stomach knotted with dread. Patricia had insisted, her voice tight on the phone, saying I needed to convince Charles I was Hannah. I hadn't confronted her yet about the trust fund or the lawyer Ethan overheard. I was still piecing it together, but the weight of her betrayal clung to me like damp clothes. Inside, the air was cool, scented with polished wood and fresh flowers. A chandelier glittered above the foyer, catching my reflection in its crystals. I looked out of place in my simple blouse and jeans, nothing like Hannah's polished style. A woman approached, her heels clicking. "You must be Hannah," she said, her smile sharp. She introduced herself as Rebecca, Charles's assistant, her dark hair pulled into a sleek bun. Her eyes scanned me, lingering a moment too long, like she knew something I didn't. She led me to a sitting room where Charles waited. He stood by a window, his back to me, tall and broad-shouldered in a tailored suit. His cane rested against the arm of a leather chair, and I remembered he was blind, or so everyone thought. "Hannah, it's good to finally meet you," he said, turning his voice warm but measured. His eyes, a pale blue, seemed to look through me, and I froze, unsure if I should correct him. Patricia's warning echoed, "Act like Hannah, or we lose everything." "I'm glad to be here," I said, my voice catching. The lie tasted bitter. Charles gestured to the couch, and we sat. He asked about our plans, meaning his and Hannah's, and I fumbled through answers, mimicking her bubbly tone from old videos I'd watched. He nodded, his fingers tracing the edge of his cane, and I wondered what he was really thinking. Was he buying it? Or was he testing me? Rebecca hovered nearby, pouring tea. Her presence like a shadow. Every time I glanced at her, she was watching, her expression unreadable. The conversation shifted to the wedding, and Charles's tone softened. "I know this is fast, Hannah, but I want us to build something real." His sincerity threw me. If he was the monster Hannah feared, why did he sound so genuine? I forced a smile, my chest tight. Lying to him felt wrong, like I was betraying someone who didn't deserve it. But then I remembered her letter, her fear, and the contract tying my family to his millions. I couldn't trust his kindness, not yet. Rebecca interrupted, saying Charles had a call. He excused himself, and she leaned in, her voice low. "Be careful with him," she said, her eyes flicking to the door. "He's not as simple as he seems." My pulse spiked. Was she warning me about his business like Hannah's letter hinted? Or something else? Before I could ask, she straightened, her face blank, and left to follow Charles. I sat there alone, the tea untouched, my mind racing. What did she know, and why tell me? I wandered the mansion, needing air, and found myself in a hallway lined with art. Voices drifted from a nearby room, Charles and Rebecca arguing softly. I crept closer, my heart pounding, and caught fragments. "She's not ready," Rebecca said. "You're pushing too hard." Charles's voice was firm. "It's my decision. The trust fund depends on this." My breath caught. The trust fund again. So he knew about the money, maybe even planned it. Was he using me just like Mom? I backed away. My sneakers silent on the marble, but my thoughts were loud. If Charles was in on this, what else was he hiding? I turned a corner and stopped at a heavy wooden door, its handle gleaming. It was locked, but a faint hum came from inside, like a radio left on low. I pressed my ear to the wood, straining to hear, but footsteps approached, and I hurried back to the sitting room, my skin prickling. That door. Rebecca's warning, Charles's words, they were pieces of a puzzle I didn't understand, but each one cut deeper, making me feel like a pawn in a game I hadn't agreed to play. Back home that night, Ethan was waiting in the kitchen, his laptop open. "You okay?" he asked, his voice soft. I shook my head, sinking into a chair. "Charles thinks I'm Hannah, and I played along." "But something's off, Ethan." Rebecca warned me, and I heard Charles mention the trust fund. His eyes widened, and he slid a folded paper across the table. I found another of Hannah's letters in my backpack. "Read it." I unfolded it, my hands trembling. "Ethan, don't trust Charles," it read. "His money's dirty. I found proof, but they're watching me. Proof watching her." My anger flared hot and sharp, mixing with fear. Hannah was out there scared, and I was stuck here lying for a man who might be a liar himself. I stared at Hannah's letter, her words slicing through me. Dirty money. Proof. They're watching me. My hands shook as I folded it, tucking it into my pocket. Ethan watched, his jaw tight. "What do we do, Em?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. I wanted to scream, to tear apart the lies piling up, but I felt like I was drowning in them. "I don't know," I admitted, my throat raw. "But I'm not marrying him until I understand what's happening." Ethan nodded, but his eyes were scared, mirroring the fear clawing at my chest. The next day, Patricia called me downstairs, her voice sharp through the house. I found her in the dining room, surrounded by fabric swatches and a binder of wedding details. She didn't look up as I entered, just pointed to a chair. "Sit. We need to go over your role. Charles expects Hannah, so you'll need to act like her." Her laugh, her gestures, everything. My stomach twisted. Act like her? I was already losing myself, and now she wanted me to erase what little was left. "Mom." "I'm not doing this," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Not until you tell me why Hannah ran." Patricia's pen froze, and she looked up, her eyes like steel. "You don't get to make demands, Emily. This family is hanging by a thread because of your father's failures. Charles's money is our lifeline. You will do this." Her words hit like a slap, but it was her coldness that hurt more. I wasn't her daughter in that moment, just a means to an end. I leaned forward, desperate. "What about Hannah?" Ethan saw her leave, crying. "She's scared, Mom." "Don't you care?" Patricia's face hardened, and she stood towering over me. "Hannah made her choice. She's always been selfish, running when things get hard. You're better than that. Don't let her drag you down." My breath caught. Selfish Hannah's letter didn't sound selfish. It sounded terrified. And Mom's refusal to even question it made my blood boil. Was she protecting Charles, or just the money I left the dining room? My heart pounding, and found Ethan in the backyard, kicking at the dirt near the old swing set. "She's not listening," I said, my voice breaking. He didn't look at me, just kept kicking. "She never does. It's always about what she wants." I wanted to hug him, to promise I'd fix this, but I felt as helpless as he looked. The swing set creaked in the wind, a ghost of our childhood when Mom's love didn't come with strings. That evening, my phone buzzed with a call from a number I didn't recognize. I answered, half expecting a telemarketer, but a slurred voice said, "Emily, it's Dad." My heart stopped. Gerald, my father hadn't called in months, not since he'd moved to a rundown apartment across town, drowning in whiskey and regret. "I heard about the wedding," he mumbled. "I'm sorry, kid. I let this happen." I gripped the phone, anger and hurt crashing together. "Let what happened, Dad." "What did you do?" he coughed, his voice fading. "The business. Charles. It's my fault. I didn't mean—" The line went dead, and I stood in my room staring at the screen. "His fault." What did that mean? I called back, but it went to voicemail. a robotic voice mocking my need for answers. I threw the phone onto the bed, my chest tight. First Mom's manipulation now, Dad's cryptic guilt. Everyone was hiding something, and I was caught in the middle, suffocating under their secrets. I went to work the next day, hoping the library's quiet would steady me, but my hands trembled as I sorted books. Clara noticed, pulling me aside. "You're not okay," she said, her voice gentle. I told her about Mom's demands, Dad's call, and the letter's warning about Charles's money. Her face darkened. "This is bigger than you, Em. You need to dig deeper, but be careful. People with that kind of money don't play nice." Her warning echoed Rebecca's, and I felt a chill. Was I in over my head back home? Patricia was waiting in the living room, a stack of Hannah's old clothes on the couch. "Try these on," she said, her tone flat. "You need to look the part at the rehearsal dinner." I stared at the dresses, all silk and sequins, so unlike my faded cardigans. "I'm not Hannah," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "I'm not wearing her life." Patricia stepped closer, her eyes blazing. "You will, or we lose everything. Do you want Ethan on the street? Do you want me begging? This is your duty." Duty. The word crushed me heavier than ever. I wanted to scream that I was her daughter, not a contract, but her gaze was unyielding. I grabbed a dress, the fabric slick against my skin, and stormed upstairs. In my room, I held it up, my reflection in the mirror, distorted by tears. Wearing it felt like surrendering, like letting Mom and Charles and Dad win. Hannah's fear, Dad's guilt, Mom's coldness, they were chains and I was trapped. My anger burning hotter with nowhere to go. The hotel ballroom glittered under soft lights, chandeliers casting flecks of gold across the tables. I stood in a borrowed dress, one of Hannah's, its tight silk pinching my ribs. The rehearsal dinner was in full swing, laughter and clinking glasses filling the air. But I felt like I was underwater. It was the night before the wedding, and every step toward tomorrow tightened the knot in my chest. I'd come straight from another sleepless night, Hannah's letter about Charles's dirty money burning a hole in my mind. I scanned the room, spotting Charles at the head table, his smile easy as he chatted with guests. Was it all an act? I moved through the crowd, forcing smiles, playing Hannah's role as Mom had drilled into me. My skin crawled every time someone called me by her name. Ethan was across the room, picking at his food, his eyes darting to me like he was waiting for me to bolt. I wished I could. Rebecca, Charles's assistant, stood near the bar, her gaze sharp, and I remembered her warning at the mansion. "Be careful." I hadn't figured out her angle, but tonight I needed answers. A man stumbled into me, his breath heavy with wine. "You're the bride, right, Hannah?" he slurred, gripping my arm. I nodded uneasy, and he leaned closer, his voice loud. "Lucky girl snagging Charles. Bet you didn't know he's been faking that blind act for years, huh?" My heart stopped. Faking, the room spun, the chatter fading to a dull roar. I pulled away, my pulse hammering. "What do you mean?" I asked, voice barely steady. He laughed, oblivious to my panic. "Oh, come on. He's sharp as a tack, sees everything. Just plays blind to keep people guessing. Ask Nathan, his cousin. He'll tell ya." Nathan. I spotted him at a table, tie loosened, pouring another drink. My legs moved before my brain caught up, weaving through guests, the dress clinging to my sweat-damp skin. "Nathan," I said. Sitting across from him, my voice low but urgent. "Is it true? About Charles?" He squinted, his face flushed. "What, the blind thing? Yeah, it's a game. He started it to test Hannah, see if she'd stick around for him, not his money. Guess it worked, huh?" He raised his glass, oblivious to the bomb he'd just dropped. My chest tightened like the air had been sucked out. Charles wasn't blind. He'd seen me every moment at the mansion, in this room, in this stupid dress. Every word, every lie I'd told to play Hannah, he'd known. Had he been laughing at me? Testing me too? The betrayal hit like a wave, not just from him, but from myself. I'd let Mom push me into this, let fear silence me, and for what? A man who'd been playing me from the start? I stood, my hands shaking, and made my way to the balcony, needing air. The night was cool, the city lights blurring below. I gripped the railing, my knuckles white, trying to piece it together. If Charles wasn't blind, what else was a lie? His kindness, his talk of building something real, had it all been to trap me in this marriage? Hannah's letter flashed in my mind. His money's dirty. Was that why he needed a bride to hide something bigger? I felt sick, exposed like he'd been watching me through a one-way mirror. Footsteps broke my thoughts, and Rebecca appeared, her silhouette sharp against the ballroom's glow. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said, her voice low. I turned, my anger spilling over. "Why didn't you tell me he's not blind?" Her eyes widened, just a flicker, then hardened. "You weren't ready to know. But you're in deep now, Emily." My breath caught. She'd called me Emily, not Hannah. She knew. My voice shook. "What's going on, Rebecca? What's he hiding?" She glanced back, checking we were alone, then stepped closer. "There's a room in the mansion. Locked second floor. It's got answers about Charles, Hannah, your family. I can get you the key, but you need to move fast." Her urgency sent a chill down my spine. A locked room. The hum I'd heard at the mansion, the one I couldn't place. Was that where Hannah's proof was? Before I could ask more, she pressed a small key into my palm, her fingers cold. "Tonight after the dinner. Don't trust anyone." She vanished back into the crowd, leaving me clutching the key, my heart racing. The footsteps outside the locked room grew louder, and I scrambled to my feet, papers clutched to my chest. My heart pounded as I shoved the contract and photos into my purse, the weight of Charles's betrayal, his years of watching me, his deal with my father sinking deeper. I slipped out, locking the door behind me, and hurried down the service stairs, the hotel's hum fading into my ragged breaths. I couldn't go back to the ballroom, couldn't face Mom's slap or Charles's lies. I needed Hannah. She was the only one who might understand this nightmare. I drove through the night, the city lights blurring past my hands tight on the wheel. Ethan's text from earlier had given me a lead. Hannah was hiding in a motel an hour away, a place called Starlight Inn, tucked off a quiet highway. I hadn't told him I was going. He was already shaken from calling out Mom in front of everyone. The road stretched dark and empty, mirroring the ache in my chest. I was done being the good daughter, the stand-in bride. I was choosing to fight, starting with finding my sister. The motel's neon sign flickered as I pulled into the lot, its faded paint peeling under the moonlight. I parked my purse heavy with stolen documents and scanned the row of doors. "Room 12, Ethan had said. I knocked softly, my breath catching, half expecting no answer. The door creaked open, and there she was, Hannah, my sister, her blonde hair, tangled eyes sunken like she hadn't slept in days. She wore an oversized sweatshirt, nothing like the polished influencer I knew from her posts. "Emily," she whispered, her voice cracking. "How did you find me?" I stepped inside the room, smelling of stale coffee and cheap air freshener. A single lamp cast shadows on the peeling wallpaper, and a duffel bag sat half-packed on the bed. "Ethan told me," I said, closing the door. "Hannah, what happened? Why did you run?" Her eyes darted to my purse, then back to my face, and she sank onto the bed, hugging her knees. "I couldn't marry him. Charles, his business partners, they threatened me. I found things, files, payments, deals that weren't right. They said if I talked, they'd hurt me." My stomach twisted, her words echoing the papers I'd just stolen. I sat beside her, careful not to push too fast. "What kind of deals?" I asked, my voice steady, despite the fear clawing at me. She looked away, her fingers twisting the hem of her sweatshirt. "Offshore accounts, fake contracts. Charles's money isn't clean, and Dad, he was part of it years ago. I confronted Charles and he didn't deny it. That's when his partners started following me." Her voice broke, and I saw the sister I'd lost, the one who'd once braided my hair and promised we'd always be a team. I reached for her hand, her skin cold. "I found something tonight," I said, pulling the contract from my purse. "It's from that locked room in Charles's mansion. It ties Dad's business to Charles, and there's a note saying I'm the better choice. Hannah, he's not blind. He's known I'm not you." Her eyes widened, a mix of shock and guilt. "He's not blind," she whispered. "God, I didn't know. I thought I was protecting you by running." Her tears fell, and I felt a surge of love and rage. Love for her, rage for the lies that had torn us apart. I squeezed her hand, my resolve hardening. We're not their pawns anymore. I'm done letting Mom and Charles control us. Hannah nodded, wiping her eyes, but her fear was palpable. I needed more than her story to fight back. I pulled out my phone and called Clara, my coworker, who answered on the second ring despite the late hour. You okay? She asked, her voice thick with sleep. I took a breath, the motel's dim light steadying me. I need your help. You said you know a journalist, right? Someone who can dig into Charles's finances. Clara paused. Then her tone sharpened. Yeah, Lauren. She's good works for a local paper. What's going on? I glanced at Hannah. Her eyes locked on me and felt a spark of power, like I was finally steering my own life. I've got evidence, contracts, photos, Hannah's story. Charles's money is dirty, and I want the world to know. Clara whistled softly. Okay, I'll call her now. Meet us at the library tomorrow, 8 a.m. Bring everything. I hung up, my heart racing but steady, like I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. Hannah looked at me, her voice small. You're really doing this? I nodded, feeling the weight of the choice, but also its strength. We're doing this. Together. For the first time in years, I saw a flicker of the old Hannah, the one who'd fight for what was right. I stood ready to head back to my car to keep moving before Mom or Charles realized I was gone. The night felt alive, full of risk, but also possibility, and I was ready to face it no matter what came next. I left Hannah at the motel, promising to call her after meeting Clara. The drive back was quiet, the highway stretching like a dark ribbon under my headlights. My purse sat heavy on the passenger seat, stuffed with the contract and photos from Charles's locked room. I felt different, like a layer of myself had cracked open, letting something fiercer breathe. I wasn't just running to save Hannah anymore. I was running toward the truth for both of us. The weight of Mom's expectations, Charles's deception, Dad's failures, they didn't own me now. By dawn, I was back in town, pulling into the library's empty lot. The building looked softer in the early light, its brick walls a familiar anchor. Clara was waiting inside, her thermos of coffee steaming as she waved me to the break room. A woman sat with her mid-30s with short brown hair and a notebook already open. This is Lauren, Clara said, her eyes bright with urgency. She's ready to hear you out. I sat, my hands steady as I pulled out the documents. Lauren's pen moved fast as I explained Hannah's disappearance, Charles's fake blindness, the contract tying Dad's business to his wealth. I showed her the photos, my own face staring back from years ago, and the note in Charles's handwriting calling me the better choice. Lauren's brow furrowed, but she didn't interrupt, just nodded, her questions sharp but kind. This is Big Emily, she said, flipping through the contract. If these offshore accounts check out, it's not just Charles, his partners could be exposed too. But we need more to go public. I swallowed, thinking of Hannah's fear, her frail frame in that motel room. Hannah knows more, I said. She's willing to talk, but she's scared. Can you protect her? Lauren leaned back, her expression serious. I can't promise safety, but I can promise we'll dig deep. Get me her statement and I'll start cross-checking these accounts. Clara squeezed my arm, her silent support grounding me. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't alone in this fight. As we wrapped up, my phone buzzed. Ethan. Mom's freaking out, he texted. She knows you left the dinner. Be careful. My stomach tightened. I'd hoped to avoid her, but I knew she'd come for me. I thanked Lauren and Clara, promising to get Hannah's story soon, and headed home, bracing for the storm. The house was too quiet when I pulled up, the porch light casting long shadows. I stepped inside, and there was Patricia standing in the hallway, her arms crossed, eyes blazing. Where were you? She demanded, her voice low but venomous. You humiliated me running off like that. Charles is asking questions. I set my purse down, the documents hidden inside, and faced her, my voice calm but firm. I'm not marrying him, Mom. I know about the contract, the trust fund, Dad's deal. I'm done being your fix. Her face twisted, a mix of shock and fury. You think you can walk away? You'll ruin us, Ethan. Me, everything we've built. I stepped closer, my heart steady. You built this on lies. I'm not Hannah, And I'm not your pawn." She laughed a cold, brittle sound. "You're nothing without this family. You'll crawl back when you see what's at stake." Her words stung, but they didn't break me. I saw her now not as my mother, but as someone desperate to control a sinking ship. I turned and walked to my room, locking the door, her voice fading behind me. Upstairs I called Ethan, who was at a friend's house, safe for now. "I'm with Hannah," I told him. "We're exposing Charles. I need you to grab something for me. Check Mom's office for a USB drive. You mentioned a lawyer. It might have more evidence." He hesitated, then agreed, his voice shaky, but determined. "I'm in M. For you and Hannah." I hung up, feeling a surge of pride for him, for us. We were fighting back together. I sat on my bed, pulling out a small box from under it. Inside was a locket Hannah had given me when we were kids, a cheap silver heart with our initials scratched on the back. She'd worn its twin at the motel, a thread tying us through the years we'd lost. I clasped it around my neck, its cool metal grounding me. I wasn't the girl who'd stood in that church drowning in Hannah's dress. I was Emily, and I was choosing my own path no matter the cost. The morning light crept through my window, soft and gold. I stood slipping the locket under my shirt and grabbed my keys. Lauren needed Hannah's story, and I needed to keep moving before Mom or Charles closed in. I stepped outside, the air crisp, and paused my hand on the car door. My reflection in the window showed a woman I was starting to recognize, scarred but unbroken. I slid into the driver's seat, the locket warm against my skin, and drove toward the truth, one quiet, deliberate choice at a time. 2 days after I should have been walking down the aisle, I sat in a corner booth at a coffee shop, the smell of fresh grounds mixing with the damp scent of my rain-soaked jacket. The place was half empty, a soft hum of conversation under the clink of mugs. My phone buzzed with notifications, texts from Ethan, a missed call from Clara, but I ignored them, my eyes locked on the newspaper in front of me. Lauren's article had hit the presses that morning, its headline, "Bold Millionaire's Empire Built on Fraud." Charles's name was everywhere, tied to offshore accounts and shady deals with my father's failed business mentioned in the subhead. I'd given Lauren everything, Hannah's story, the contract, the photos, and she'd woven it into a blade that cut deep. I sipped my coffee, its bitterness sharp, and felt a strange mix of relief and guilt. The world knew now, and Charles's partners were scrambling, turning on him to save themselves. But I'd also dragged my family's name through the mud. Dad's mistakes, Mom's desperation, it was all laid bare. I'd wanted justice, but this felt heavier, like I'd burned down the house to kill a snake. A couple at the next table glanced at me, whispering, and I wondered if they recognized me from the article's grainy photo. I pulled my hood up, shrinking into the booth. My phone buzzed again, this time a call from an unknown number. I hesitated, then answered, my voice low. "Hello." A pause. Then Charles's voice, calm but strained. "Emily, we need to talk." My grip tightened on the mug. He wasn't pretending anymore, no fake blindness, no Hannah act. "There's nothing to say," I said, my tone flat. "Your secrets are out." He sighed, a sound I hadn't expected, almost human. "I didn't want this. Meet me, please. I owe you the truth." His words caught me off guard, soft where I'd expected anger. I hung up without answering, my heart racing. The truth. After everything, what could he possibly say? I left the coffee shop, the rain colder now, and walked to my car, the newspaper tucked under my arm. The article was everywhere online, trending on local news sites, and I knew Mom would see it soon if she hadn't already. I'd avoided home since our fight crashing at Clara's apartment, but I couldn't hide forever. As I drove, my mind churned. Charles's call unsettled me, his voice too steady for a man whose empire was crumbling. Was he trying to manipulate me again, or was there more I didn't know? I pulled into a park near Clara's place, needing to clear my head. The rain had stopped, leaving puddles that reflected the gray sky. I sat on a bench, the wood damp against my jeans, and opened the newspaper again. Lauren had quoted Hannah anonymously, her words about Charles's threats chilling on the page. I felt proud of her, of us, for speaking out, but also scared. What if his partners came after her or me? I'd started this, and now the consequences were rippling, unstoppable. The rain fell harder, soaking my hair as I stood between Charles and Mom, their words hanging like smoke in the air. I wanted to run, to disappear into the park's wet shadows, but my feet wouldn't move. Charles's eyes, no longer hidden behind his fake blindness, searched my face, almost pleading. Mom's hand clutched the newspaper, her knuckles white, her voice dropping to a hiss. "You think you're a hero, Emily? You've destroyed us." I swallowed my throat dry and said nothing. What could I say? The truth was out, and it hurt more than I'd imagined. Charles took a step forward, his voice soft. "Emily, I didn't mean for it to go this far. Let me explain." I shook my head, backing away, the gravel crunching under my boots. "No, you don't get to rewrite this." His shoulders slumped, and for a moment I saw a man unraveling, not the untouchable millionaire. But it didn't erase the photos, the contract, the years he'd watched me. I turned to Mom, my voice low. "I did what you never would, protected Hannah. You should have done that." Her eyes widened, then narrowed, but she didn't speak. The silence was worse than her anger, like she was cutting me out without a word. She turned and walked to her car, the newspaper falling to the ground, its ink bleeding in the rain. Charles lingered, then followed his driver, opening the SUV's door. I stood alone, the park empty now, the rain washing away the last of their presence. My chest ached, not with triumph, but with loss. I'd won something, but at what cost? I drove to Clara's, my hands steady, but my mind a mess. Her apartment was warm, the smell of fresh laundry calming, but I couldn't shake the image of Mom's face, her silence louder than any scream. Clara was on her couch, scrolling through reactions to Lauren's article. "It's blowing up, Em," she said, looking up. "People are furious about Charles. You did good." I nodded, sinking into a chair, but her words felt hollow. Good, I'd exposed him, but I'd also exposed my family's shame, my own pain. I wasn't sure what good felt like anymore. Ethan arrived an hour later, his backpack slung over one shoulder, the USB drive in his hand. "Got it," he said, setting it on the table. His cheek still held a faint red mark from Mom's slap at the dinner, and I felt a pang of guilt. "You okay?" I asked, my voice soft. He shrugged, avoiding my eyes. "Mom called me a traitor. Said I'm no better than you." His words stung, but his quiet resolve mirrored mine. We were in this together, even if it hurt. I plugged the USB into Clara's laptop, my fingers trembling. Files loaded, bank transfers, emails, a ledger linking Charles's company to Mom's name. My breath caught. She wasn't just desperate for his money. She'd been blackmailing him, threatening to expose his fraud if he didn't marry one of us. The dates went back years before Hannah's engagement. Mom had planned this long before she pushed me into that dress. I leaned back, the screen's glow harsh. "She used us both," I whispered, my voice barely audible. Ethan nodded, his jaw tight, and Clara cursed under her breath. A knock at the door made us jump. Clara opened it, revealing a woman I didn't know, her coat dripping. "I'm from Lauren's paper," she said, glancing at me. "The article's got traction, but Charles's partners are lawyering up. We need you and Hannah to go on record, Emily. It's now or never." My stomach dropped. On record. My name. My face out there for the world. I looked at Ethan, his eyes wide, and Clara, her nod, urging me on. I'd started this, but the idea of stepping into the spotlight, of being seen, felt like jumping off a cliff. I stood pacing the small living room, the USB's files still open on the screen. Mom's betrayal, Charles's lies, Hannah's fear, they were all tangled in me, and going public would untangle them, but it would also bare my soul. I stopped, my hands clenching, and looked out the window at the rain-slicked street. A streetlight flickered, its light weak but steady, like the part of me that had fought this far. I turned back to the woman, my voice quiet. "I'll do it." But Hannah decides for herself. She left, promising to follow up, and I sank onto the couch, the room silent except for the rain tapping the windows. Ethan sat beside me, his shoulder brushing mine, and Clara busied herself making tea, giving us space. I closed my eyes, the weight of the day settling in my bones. I'd exposed the truth, but it hadn't set me free, not yet. Mom's silence. Charles's plea, the USB's secrets, they were chains I still carried, and the fight wasn't over. I leaned my head back, the world fading, and let the quiet take me heavy and still. A month had passed since the article shook everything apart, and I was sitting on a bench in a small park near my new apartment. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of wet leaves and distant wood smoke. My new place was a tiny studio barely big enough for a bed and a desk, but it was mine, paid for with my library savings. The park was quiet, just a few joggers and a dog chasing a tennis ball. I leaned back, my scarf loose around my neck, and watched the sky shift from pink to gold. For the first time in weeks, I could breathe without feeling like I was holding up a crumbling wall. I'd moved out the day after Mom's silence in the rain, her rejection, a wound that still ached but no longer bled. Today I was meeting Dad, who'd called last week, his voice clearer than I'd heard in years. He was in rehab, 3 weeks sober, and wanted to talk. I'd agreed, not out of duty, but because I needed to see who he was without the whiskey fog. The park's gravel path crunched, and I looked up to see him approaching, his coat too big for his thinned frame. He carried a paper bag, the kind from a bakery, and his eyes held a cautious hope. "Emily," he said, sitting beside me, the bench creaking. "Thanks for coming." His hands fidgeted with the bag, and I noticed his nails, once bitten raw, were neat now. I nodded, unsure what to say. We'd never been close, not since his business collapsed, and he drowned in bottles. But here in the soft morning light, he seemed smaller, less like the shadow that loomed over my childhood. "I brought donuts," he said, opening the bag. "Your favorite, right, glazed?" I smiled, surprised he remembered. "Yeah, still are." I took one, the sugar sticky on my fingers, and we ate in silence, the park's sounds filling the space. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start, a moment where we weren't fighting the past. "I'm sorry," he said finally, his voice low, "for the deal with Charles, for letting your mom push you into that mess. I was weak, Em. I thought money would fix us." His honesty caught me off guard, raw and unpolished. I looked at him, his eyes fixed on the ground, and saw a man trying to rebuild, not just apologize. "I carried your shame for years," I said, my voice steady. "Every time Mom pushed, I thought it was my job to clean it up. But I'm done with that." He nodded, his jaw tight, and I felt a weight lift, like I'd set down a burden I didn't know I was holding. We talked more about his rehab, his counselor's tough love, and I listened, not as a daughter fixing him, but as someone meeting him anew. When he left, promising to call, I stayed on the bench, the donut sweetness lingering. I wasn't ready to trust him fully, but I was ready to let him try. Later that day, I walked to the library, my shift starting soon. The streets were busy, kids on bikes weaving past, and I felt anchored, like I belonged to this moment, not the chaos of before. Clara was at the front desk, her smile wide when she saw me. "Got a surprise," she said, pulling me to the staff room. A small cake sat on the table, surrounded by paper cups and a handwritten sign, "For Emily, our hero." My throat tightened. "You didn't have to," I said, but she waved me off. "We wanted to. You stood up to a millionaire and your mom. That's worth celebrating." The other librarians gathered, their chatter warm, and we cut the cake, chocolate crumbs scattering. They asked about the article about Hannah, and I shared what I could, their support wrapping around me like a quilt. I'd spent so long feeling alone, but here in this cluttered room, I wasn't. Clara raised her cup, her voice teasing. To Emily, who took down the bad guys and still shelves books like a pro. I laughed, a real laugh, and felt a piece of myself settle like a stone finding its place in a riverbed. I left the pond and wandered deeper into the park, my boots crunching on the leaf-strewn path. The air was cooler now, the kind of autumn chill that made you pull your jacket tighter. I stopped by a young oak, its branches bare but stubborn, and ran my fingers over its rough bark. I'd been coming to this park every evening, finding solace in its quiet corners. Today I carried a small trowel in my pocket, a plan forming since I'd moved into my studio. I knelt, the earth soft under my knees, and started digging a shallow hole at the tree's base. Hannah was coming to visit tomorrow, her first trip since the motel. She'd called last night, her voice stronger, talking about a job she'd applied for, a step toward rebuilding. We'd planned a weekend drive to the lake, where we used to swim as kids, just the two of us to talk and laugh without the weight of Charles or Mom. I smiled, picturing her in the passenger seat teasing me about my old car's rattling engine. Our bond wasn't perfect, but it was ours again, stitched back together with time and truth. As I dug, I thought about Ethan, who'd texted me earlier, excited about a new friend he'd met at community college. He was staying with a cousin, avoiding Mom's coldness, and I was proud of him for carving his own path. I'd sent him a care package yesterday, his favorite snacks, a book on bike repair, small things to say I was still here. The hole was deep enough now, and I pulled a pocket knife from my bag, its blade worn but sharp. I carved 2 letters into the oak's trunk, E and H for Emily and Hannah, simple, uneven, but permanent. I sat back, brushing dirt from my hands, and felt a quiet shift inside me. I wasn't the girl who'd carried everyone's burdens, nor the one who'd stood frozen under Mom's glare. I was just me, flawed and steady, learning to live without proving myself to anyone. The park was emptying, the last joggers fading into the dusk, and I stayed, the tree's shadow stretching long. I thought of Rebecca, Charles's assistant, who'd emailed me last week, a short note apologizing for her silence and offering to testify against his partners. I'd replied thanking her and let it go. Her truth was hers to carry now. My phone buzzed, a reminder for my therapy session tomorrow. I'd started going a week ago, prompted by nightmares of Charles's voice, his eyes seeing too much. The therapist, a kind woman with a soft voice, had asked me to name one thing I wanted for myself. I'd said peace, but I was still figuring out what that meant. Talking helped, though, unraveling the knots of fear and guilt I'd tied myself in. I stood the trowel back in my pocket and looked at the carved initials. They weren't a monument, just a mark that we'd been here, that we'd survived. I walked home as the streetlights flickered on their glow, pooling on the sidewalk. My apartment was a few blocks away, its single window facing a brick wall, but I loved its smallness, its mineness. I'd hung a photo on the fridge this morning, one I'd found in a box, me and Hannah at a school play, our faces painted with cheap makeup, grinning like the world was ours. It wasn't a perfect memory, but it was honest, and that was enough. Inside, I kicked off my boots and sank onto the couch, the radiator humming softly. The city's noise drifted through the window, car horns, distant voices, but it didn't bother me. I closed my eyes, my breathing slow, and let the day settle. The fight with Charles, with Mom, with the past, it was still there, but it was quieter now, like a river smoothing its own stones. I wasn't healed, not fully, but I was here in this moment, and it felt like enough. I rested my head back, the carved initials vivid in my mind, and let the stillness hold me gentle and sure. 6 months had passed since the article broke, and I was in my apartment, the morning light filtering through a thrift store curtain. My desk was cluttered with notebooks, a half-finished manuscript, open, my laptop humming softly. I was 28 now, and this small space with its chipped paint and creaky floors felt like home. I'd started writing my story not for fame, but to make sense of it all, to turn the chaos of those months into something I could hold. The words came slowly, each one a step toward understanding who I'd become. I leaned back, sipping tea from a mug Hannah had sent, its handle chipped but warm in my hands. She was in a new city now, working at a community center, her voice brighter in our weekly calls. We'd gone to the lake last month, just like we planned, and spent a day skipping stones, laughing over old memories. She'd hugged me before she left, her arms tight, and said, "You saved us, Em." I didn't feel like a savior, but her words stayed with me, a quiet anchor. Ethan was thriving too, sending me photos of his college dorm, his bike propped against a wall. He'd started a club for gearheads, his texts full of excitement about engines and late-night pizza runs. Mom was still a ghost in my life, her silence a choice I'd learned to accept. I'd mailed her a letter last week, not expecting a reply, just to say I was moving forward. It felt like closing a book I'd read too many times, its pages worn, but no longer heavy. I stood stretching and walked to the window, the city waking up below. A neighbor waved from across the street, her toddler tugging at her hand, and I waved back, a small ritual that grounded me. I'd started jogging in the mornings, a habit I never thought I'd keep. The rhythm of my sneakers on pavement, the burn in my lungs, it was mine, a choice I made for no one else. I wasn't running from anything anymore, just toward the next breath the next day. Yesterday I'd gone to therapy, my third session this month. The office was small with a couch that smelled faintly of lavender, and my therapist Marie had asked me to write down one thing I was proud of. I'd written I chose myself. It sounded simple, but it wasn't. Choosing myself meant walking away from Mom's demands, from Charles's lies, from the guilt of Dad's failures. It meant sitting here in this apartment writing my truth instead of hiding it. I glanced at my manuscript, the first chapter, rough but honest. I'd read it at a bookstore event next week, a small gathering Clara had organized. The thought made my stomach flutter, but not with fear, more like anticipation, like stepping into a room I'd built myself. I wasn't sure if anyone would come, but I wanted to share this to let others know they could choose themselves too. I sat back down, my fingers hovering over the keyboard, and started typing, the words flowing easier now. The bookstore was small, tucked between a cafe and a vintage shop, its shelves packed with stories I'd once lost myself in. I stood at a wooden podium, my manuscript in hand, the pages worn from my nervous fingers. The room was half full, maybe 20 people, their faces kind but unfamiliar, except for Hannah and Ethan in the front row. Hannah's smile was steady. Her hair pulled back, and Ethan gave me a thumbs up, his grin boyish despite the months we'd weathered. I took a breath, the scent of paper and fresh coffee grounding me, and began to read. My voice started shaky, but it found its rhythm, carrying the words I'd written in the quiet of my apartment. I told our story, not the headlines, not the drama, but the small moments, the weight of a choice. I didn't want the sting of a mother's silence, the courage it took to walk away. The audience listened, their eyes soft, some nodding, like they'd been there too. I didn't cry, didn't falter, just let the truth spill out, raw and unpolished. When I finished, the room was still, then broke into gentle applause, a sound that felt like a hug. I stepped down, my legs wobbly, and Hannah pulled me into her arms. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered, her voice thick. Ethan joined us, his arm around my shoulders, and for a moment we were just us, three siblings who'd found each other again. Clara was there too, snapping a photo, her laugh cutting through the hum of chatter. I mingled after shaking hands, answering questions, and felt a quiet strength, like I'd claimed a piece of myself I'd long given away. Later, alone in my apartment, I sat on the floor, a takeout box of noodles cooling beside me. The city's lights flickered outside, a steady pulse against the dark. I'd watched the news earlier. Charles had been sentenced to a 7-year term for fraud, his empire dismantled. I'd expected relief, maybe triumph, but I felt only a soft ache, like closing a door I'd never open again. His choices weren't mine to carry, and I'd learned to set them down. I picked up my journal, its pages filled with late-night thoughts, and wrote a single line: "I am enough." It was the lesson I'd fought for, the one that took root in the wreckage of those months. I'd spent years believing I had to fix, to please, to be someone else. Hannah, Mom's savior, Dad's redemption. But the truth was simpler, harder. I was enough. Not because I won or lost, but because I chose to keep going. That choice, quiet and stubborn, was my freedom, and it was a gift I wanted others to find too. I thought of the people in the bookstore, their stories unspoken, but felt and realized my pain wasn't unique. We all carry burdens, family betrayal, fear, and we all face moments where we must choose ourselves, not out of selfishness, but survival. That's what I'd learned: to hold my own heart gently, to forgive its cracks, to walk forward even when the path was unclear. It wasn't a loud victory, just a steady one, built in the small acts of living, writing, jogging, laughing with my sister, breathing through the hard days. I closed the journal, the pen resting on its spine, and leaned against the wall, the city's hum, a soft lullaby. The past was behind me. Not gone, but no longer in charge. I was here in my own skin, and that was the deepest healing I could ask for. I stood ready for tomorrow, for the next page, knowing I'd write it my way. What's a moment you chose yourself, even when it hurt? Share it below. I'd love to hear your story. If this moved you, please like and subscribe to join me in finding light through the hard times. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, and thank you for being here, for listening. Here's to healing, one quiet step at a time.